everybody, this is Teresa from Phoenix Gate Crafts. Last week I was talking about choosing a pattern because you want to do a project, and the next step after that, or concurrently with that, is choosing your yarn. So there's going to be two aspects to talk about. Today we're talking about the fiber content of yarn, and next week we're actually going to be talking about choosing colors. Now, all patterns talk about a recommended yarn that they put in the pattern. So, for example, I have a pattern that recommends Red Heart Super Saver or Karen Simply Soft or any number of yarns that they used. Now, you're not restricted to those specific yarns. You can substitute any kind you want. But there are recommendations for keeping your within the same material or specific material types for different projects. So let's just get into what kinds of yarns there are. So there's really three general types of yarn. There are man-made, plant-based, and animal-based fibers. Man-made include, but are by no means limited to, acrylic, polyester, nylon, and rayon. So I don't have any with an actual label, but this is Bernat blanket yarn. I had it up here a few weeks ago. And this stuff, this is a Chanel type yarn and it's very soft. This is the most famous polyester material. You want to be careful when you use this that you're not using it anywhere that gets hot because it'll catch on fire. That's the cautionary tale with this stuff, but it's very warm and insulating and wonderful. Acrylic is the most common type of man-made fiber you're going to find. It's the kind that's in the Red Heart Super Saver and everything that you find in the big box stores. It's very inexpensive. It's effectively plastic when it's made. It's the best for washing and drying. Well, it's not the best, but it's pretty easy to wash and dry because you can wash it on the gentle cycle in a lower temperature and you can air dry it, you can hang it, but you can use the washing machine as long as you keep it in cooler temperatures. So this is some Karen Simply Soft. I like this stuff. It has a very nice sheen to it. But there are as many different kinds of acrylic as there are different kinds of yarn. So they have different finishes, they have different thicknesses. All of the different yarns can be made in any thickness. But acrylic, because it's man-made, winds up being the most unique in that no two acrylics look exactly alike, and that's on purpose. Acrylic is very sensitive to heat, so you don't want to use it anywhere that you're going to have a lot of heat put on it, such as in the kitchen with cooking pots and pans and stuff. It will actually melt if it gets too hot. It's not the best when you want to get it wet. It doesn't absorb because plastic doesn't absorb. Oh my goodness, it keeps falling down. Anyway, acrylic doesn't absorb moisture, so you don't want it on anything that you're going to use like hand towels just because it doesn't wick away the moisture. But because it's plastic, the colors don't bleed. So for the most part, unless you're actually getting some melting, the color isn't ever going to leave the fabric. And it's actually very stretchy. If I pull this out, there is some natural stretch to the fiber itself. And over time, the big critique is that if you're making a bag or something out of this, the bag is going to stretch and become misshapen. So what are some things that this is good for? Well, these tend to be good for things like hats, scarves, gloves. I've made, let's see, a sweater is doable, but the big thing I like to make using these are blankets and shawls. This shawl, in fact, was made with Red Heart Super Saver stripes in polo color. And it's wonderful, it's warm, but because it doesn't wick away moisture, it doesn't it doesn't maintain a good level of heat. So you're not only going to keep in the warmth, you're also going to keep in the moisture, and that will make it feel muggy. So acrylic may not be the best, most ideal thing for a sweater. It's definitely not good for socks because socks wear super abrasively. And there is a good amount of wear and tear that this can take, but it's not perfect, and this wears a little faster than, say, natural fibers. Now, next are plant-based fibers. Oh, allergies. I forgot to mention allergies. Artificial, man-made fibers, particularly acrylic, are often called hypoallergenic. They're not truly hyperallergenic because some people have skin sensitivities that defy logic, but for the most part, unless you get a particularly rough acrylic, you're not likely to have an allergy issue with it. Now, moving on to plant-based, there are cotton, linen, hemp, and bamboo. So this is actually silk and bamboo. It is 70% viscose from bamboo and 30% silk, and it is very soft. Bamboo is a very strong yarn, though it is fairly hard to find. So I'm not going to talk too much about this, but cotton is an entirely different matter. Now, cotton, this is my favorite cotton, is Knit Picks Dishy. Cotton is the sturdiest fiber. It also has the highest melt rate, the highest melt temperature. So you can get this very hot and it'll burn before it melts. And this is the one that's actually very good for use in the kitchen and in the bathroom. So I have made some wonderful dish rags, pot holders. I have made drying cloths. I have made hand towels. I make these little soap saver scrubbies out of this. There is so much you can use with this. I even made a floor mat because this stuff is durable. And it's not just this particular brand. Any full 100% cotton is very, well, durable. It's made from the cotton plant, and you know, you've heard about when we were talking about slavery in 11th grade and how it's got the white part and everything. That's what cotton's made out of. And because it's the same stuff that you get in a lot of your summer clothes, you can actually wash it and dry it in the washing machine on regular cycles, and as long as you weave in your ends, you're fine. Depending on who did the dyeing, it can bleed colors. So if you aren't sure and it's not a trusted brand, you should do a swatch first and throw it in the washing machine with a color catcher and see if anything spreads. It has no issue with heat and it wicks away moisture very well. It's actually known as a cool fiber because it can't retain heat. That's actually part of what makes it so that it doesn't melt or burn, because it doesn't hold on to heat at all. So if you're going to use this to make clothes, and you totally can use it to make clothes, I have a shirt that I wear sometimes. You've probably seen the picture of it on my Facebook with stripes and a whole bunch of holes in it because it's a V-stitch crochet shirt. It's very good for summer type clothes when you want the sweat and the heat to evaporate. But if you're trying for something wintry like scarves or hats or sweaters, it's not a particularly good fiber for that because it won't keep you warm. Also, don't use it in socks unless it's part of a blend, because although it's very sturdy, you're going to feel every single bump and stitch. It also has no stretch, no natural stretch anyway. The nature of knitting and crochet is very stretchy, and that's how it stretches, but the fiber itself doesn't stretch. I have a bag that you can find and purchase the pattern for on my Etsy, and that bag is made 100% cotton, and what happens is it's a market bag, so it's got a nice mesh to it, and as you put items in it, it stretches because the stitches stretch. And then you throw it into the wash, and the stitches condense back into a smaller shape because it's not the material that's stretching. That's retaining its lack of elasticity. But the stitches through the washing process are actually getting back into their original formation, and it looks like the item is shrinking. But then you put more stuff in it and it expands again. And that is one of the reasons why market bags, I think I said before that I used it to make a welcome mat. Anything that has hardy wear is a very good use for cotton material. Then you have animal fibers. So you've got different kinds of wool essentially for this. You have sheep, you have alpaca and merino wool. You also can have silk, and you can have yak down. Now, before any animal activists start freaking out, for the most part, this is actually a very humane process. You're not killing any animals in the making of this wool. You're shearing the sheep every year in the summer. And sheep actually like it because what happens is they grow their wool during the winter when they need it and they need the warmth. And then during the spring, once things start to get warm, they are taken and they are sheared. So it is all shaved off and collected. So then they're naked and very adorable when they're naked, but they are very happy to be naked, even if the shearing process is terrifying. Naked sheep, not naked farmers. So I'm getting weird looks from my husband. Sorry about that bad joke. Anyway, so you wind up with happy, cool sheep during the summer, and then they start regrowing their wool again in the winter. But wool it often comes in hanks like this. It's actually the most expensive out of all of these. The acrylic usually runs in the traditional size skeins like the Karen Simply Soft. This usually runs anywhere from $2 in American money to $6, depending on quality, size, that stuff. If you get a particularly large skein like one of the 1-pounders, it's probably closer to 10 or 11 American dollars. The Dishy that I had costs $3, but this is a full 100-gram skein, and it actually goes very far because most of the projects I use are not very big. And so this is a little bit more expensive, but natural made items tend to be. The thing that's expensive is wool. And skeins can go anywhere. I've seen them as low as $8 for 100% wool, and I've seen them as much as $52. But I have heard rumors of $75 or $80 skeins of wool. Don't worry, this one did not cost me nearly that much. My husband's eyes are kind of bugging out. But wool, you do not want to wash wool. It's the one that is known to shrink. And it isn't so much that it shrinks, it's that it felts. So when you add heat and moisture, the little interlocking fibers that make wool as sturdy as it does, they kind of release where they were, they move, and they lock on in different ways. So you lose your stitch definition, and it winds up looking like a piece of felt. That's literally what felt is wool that has been put together and then washed and tumbled intentionally to do that. I know that Very Pink Knits has a wonderful Easter basket pattern where it is actually intended felting. And that is a style of crafting that often involves knitting, and you do that on purpose. But if you don't want to do that, you want to make sure you do not wash in a machine. Now, you can always get this stuff wet. That's not the issue. It's the heat and the friction of the washing machine that's the issue. So hand wash this stuff, lay flat to dry, and you should be fine. This one's also most likely to have color bleeding. So this skein in particular came with a warning that you need to actually treat it very well because it has been intensely dyed, and it is very likely that the colors are going to bleed, so it needs a little bit of extra treatment. Some high quality wools, you have to take a little extra care to make sure that the color doesn't wind up moving onto your foot or your hands. You usually figure out if it's going to be a problem while you're knitting because all of a sudden your needles in your hands are a different color than they originally were. But although this has a bad reaction with heat and moisture, it's actually the warmest material. So you want to use these on hats. This is the perfect material for sweater, and this is a super amazing material for socks. In fact, this one is a specific sock yarn. That means that it's 80% wool, 20% multicolored neps. I'm not sure what neps are. But anyway, it's a combination of wool and something else, and it is specifically designed to be hardy. So when you knit it very tightly and you put it on your foot, you are not likely to felt it, and it will actually keep your feet very warm. For socks though, I recommend getting a wool that is specifically superwash. This is not superwash from what I can tell, because superwash is a treatment for superwash is a treatment for wool that makes it so it doesn't felt, and you can run it through the washing machine much more easily without losing your stitch definitions. All right. So even though you have to be careful about washing, it keeps you warm. The warmest socks I have are my fully superwash wool socks with nylon. This also has an intense amount of stretch, but it's got memory. So you stretch it out and then it'll spring back to its original shape. So that helps a lot when you're making it. So it's not going to stretch and stay stretched. However, it's also the one that most people are sensitive to. So you want to be very careful. I actually have a bit of a sensitivity, not an allergy to wool, but I do have some sensitivity. So when I'm using wool, especially if it's 100% wool that's not superwash, I have to be very careful not to rub my eyes, because then I'll start feeling like I've got grit in my eyes, and it brings on a mild allergic reaction. Some people are very sensitive. They'll get hives if they're in the same, not in the same room, but if they touch it for any length of time, they can get hives or rashes. So if you want to give something to somebody that's made out of wool, it's a good idea to ask if they have any skin sensitivities. Acrylic is a really good fallback. It's not quite as durable as most wools, but you don't have the felting and you don't have the allergy issue as much. So I hope this helps. When you're trying to substitute yarn, try to stay in the same weight class, but understanding what materials are best used for what kind of projects, I hope helps you be able to choose a yarn a little bit better. Next week we're going to talk about color. So I'll see you next week. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, subscribe to my channel, and hit the bell notification so that next week you're told when I upload the new video. So anyway, have a wonderful week, you guys. See you next week. Bye.